Snow fell like ashes from a tired sky, blanketing the streets of Chicago in cold indifference. The city was alive, yet it felt dead to one boy who trudged down the sidewalk, his shoes soaked, his hands buried in a torn hoodie that barely kept out the wind. Philip Abel didn't look like he belonged anywhere. Not in this city. Not in that neighborhood. Not even in the mirror he faced each morning. He was 16, quiet, reserved, with eyes too deep for his age and skin the color of roasted chestnut. His classmates said it made him look out of place. He'd learned not to respond. Every word he spoke only seemed to remind people he didn't fit their world. But there was something about the way he walked, a calm dignity, an echo of grace that didn't match his ragged clothes or second-hand backpack. Even in poverty, Philip moved like someone born from gentler beginnings. Only he didn't know that yet. The rusted gates of Lincoln Heights Academy loomed ahead, the kind of high school where the parking lot sparkled with BMWs, and cafeteria gossip revolved around summer homes and designer sneakers. Philip walked past the line of cars, their engines purring like lions. A group of students in sleek winter coats stood by the entrance. Dylan Hartford was among them, tall, golden-haired, wearing a smirk like it was part of his uniform. "Well, if it isn't the scholarship mascot," Dylan sneered as Philip walked by. "Where's your donation box today, Abel? Or did you already beg enough for lunch?" Laughter followed, sharp and cruel. Philip kept his head down. He was used to it. He had been since the first day he arrived on that scholarship program. The poor black kid in a sea of privilege. Still, it hurt every single time. "Hey, Dylan," one of the girls whispered, "don't be mean. He's kinda smart." Dylan chuckled. "Yeah, well, brains don't buy suits. Trash stays trash." Philip exhaled through his nose, forcing calm. He wanted to fight back, but he remembered what Mrs. Lopez, the old woman who took him in, always said. "You can't throw stones at every barking dog, hijo. Some things you rise above." He rose above again. In class, Mr. Harold, the literature teacher, called on Philip to read a passage from To Kill a Mockingbird. Philip's voice was steady, rich, and clear. He read with emotion, his tone softening at every moral line, his eyes distant, as though he knew what injustice felt like firsthand. When he finished, silence filled the room. "Beautifully done," Mr. Harold said quietly. "You read like someone who's lived those words." Philip smiled faintly. "Maybe I have, sir." The teacher frowned slightly, not out of disapproval, but curiosity. There was something refined in the boy's speech, an elegance that didn't come from Chicago's rough streets. His vocabulary, his poise, they didn't match his circumstances. "Philip," he said after class, "do you know anything about your father?" Philip stiffened. "No, sir. My mom never told me. She said some stories are better left in heaven." Mr. Harold nodded slowly. "Then maybe one day heaven will send them back." Philip didn't understand what he meant, not yet. That night, after homework and a bowl of watery soup, Philip sat by the small window of Mrs. Lopez's apartment. Outside, Chicago glowed, a city of light he could never touch. He took out an old, folded photograph, the only one he had of his mother. Diane Abel, her smile still warm, her hair curly and soft, her skin a shade lighter than his. She'd been gone 5 years now, lost to illness and struggle. He could still hear her voice. "Someday, you'll find where you belong, my little prince. Even if the world can't see your crown." He'd been only 11 when she said that, lying in a hospital bed with her fingers clutching his. He never understood why she called him prince. Now, he thought she just meant it to comfort him. He didn't know she meant it literally. The next morning, things went from bad to worse. Philip arrived at school to find police officers outside the principal's office. Dylan and his friends stood nearby, looking shaken, though their smirks betrayed satisfaction. Philip Abel, the principal said sternly, we found this wallet in your locker. Dylan says it went missing during gym yesterday. Care to explain? Philip stared in disbelief. That's not mine. I've never even. Save it, Dylan interrupted. We all saw you hanging around the lockers after practice. The room buzzed with whispers. Figures. Guess we know how he pays for lunch. Typical. Philip's heart pounded. I didn't steal it, he shouted, trembling. But the principal wasn't listening. He'd already made up his mind. You're suspended pending investigation, he declared coldly. Return your books and leave the premises. Philip felt his world crack open. His scholarship, gone. His dignity, trampled. His mother's memory, stained. He walked out of the building, the laughter of his classmates echoing behind him like gunfire. Outside, the snow had turned to rain, cold, relentless. Philip walked aimlessly, his backpack clutched like a lifeline. He turned into a side street when a sleek black Rolls-Royce pulled up beside him. The window rolled down, revealing a man in his 50s, tall, sharp-featured, with silver at his temples and eyes that mirrored Philip's own. Philip, the man said softly. Philip stopped. Who are you? The man's voice trembled. My name is Edward Abel. Philip frowned. The name sounded familiar, like something from the news or the papers Mrs. Lopez sometimes read aloud. Then it hit him. Edward Abel, the billionaire tech magnate, founder of Abel Dynamics. Why are you talking to me? Philip asked cautiously. Edward's eyes glistened. Because you're my son. The words hung in the air like thunder that never quite struck. Philip blinked, stepping back. What did you just say? Edward stepped out of the car slowly, holding out a small envelope. Inside was an old photo of a younger Edward, smiling beside Diane. Philip's breath caught. It was his mother, unmistakably. Her same soft curls, her hand resting on Edward's shoulder, her smile radiant. I loved your mother, Edward said quietly. More than anything. But things got complicated. People tried to keep us apart. I lost her, and you, before I could make things right. Philip shook his head, his voice rising. You think you can just show up and fix everything? After 16 years? My mom died alone. She worked herself to death while you lived in mansions. Edward's face fell. I know, and I'll never forgive myself. But I've been looking for you for years. Please, son, don't call me that. Philip snapped. You're not my father. My mother was my family. You're just a stranger with money. He turned and walked away, his tears mixing with the rain. Edward stood there, the city lights reflecting in his eyes like broken glass. He wanted to run after him, but he knew he couldn't force forgiveness. Not yet. Philip arrived at Mrs. Lopez's apartment soaked and silent. She took one look at him and gasped. Dios mío, what happened? He told her everything. The expulsion, the accusation, the strange man who claimed to be his father. Mrs. Lopez's hands trembled. Edward Abel, she whispered. Mijo, your mother once said that name. She told me you were born in a hospital on the north side, under a different name. Philip stared. You mean it's true? Mrs. Lopez nodded slowly. Your mother hid you to protect you. She said some people would never accept you, because your skin told a story they didn't want to hear. Philip sank into the couch, numb. Everything he thought he knew about himself was unraveling. That night, he couldn't sleep. He kept replaying the image of Edward's face, the guilt, the sadness, the undeniable resemblance. He hated that he wanted to believe him. By dawn, he made a decision. He would meet Edward again, not to accept him, but to hear the truth. To find out why his mother had to suffer in silence. Before leaving, he looked once more at Diane's photograph. Mom, he whispered, If this man really was yours, I'll find out what happened. I'll make them remember you. As Philip stepped outside, a black car was already waiting across the street. The driver opened the door silently, and Edward Abel stepped out, holding an umbrella this time. Neither spoke for a long moment. Then Edward said quietly, "Get in, son. We have much to talk about." Philip hesitated, then took a slow, uncertain step toward the car. The door closed behind him with a soft thud that sounded like the end of one life and the beginning of another. The ride was silent. The hum of the car engine was the only sound between them, a soft, uneasy lullaby. Philip sat stiffly in the back seat, his hands folded, eyes staring out the window as Chicago blurred past, steel towers, flashing lights, the endless gray of the city. He could feel Edward's gaze on him every few seconds, like a man watching a ghost come back to life. Philip didn't speak, and Edward didn't press him. Finally, the car turned off the busy street and entered a gated drive. A massive mansion loomed ahead, tall windows, marble steps, gardens dusted with snow. The kind of place Philip had only seen on magazine covers in the barbershop. When the car stopped, Edward spoke softly. "Welcome home, Philip." Philip let out a dry laugh. "Home? You mean your home? Not mine." Edward sighed. "You're right, but it was supposed to be yours too." The front doors opened to reveal a house that looked more like a museum, grand chandeliers, gleaming floors, and paintings worth more than Philip's entire neighborhood. A butler appeared, freezing mid-step when he saw Philip. His eyes darted briefly to Edward, then to the boy's skin. He forced a polite smile, but Philip saw the hesitation. He'd seen that look before. "Prepare the guest room, Henry," Edward said curtly. "The east wing." "Of course, sir," the butler murmured, then disappeared. Philip turned to Edward. "You didn't have to bring me here. You could have just told me whatever you wanted to say in the car." Edward folded his hands. "No. You deserve to hear it properly. And there's something you need to see." He led Philip down a long hallway filled with portraits, generations of Abels in black suits and proud poses. But none of them looked like Philip. They were all white, cold, expressionless. At the end of the hallway was a door slightly ajar. Edward pushed it open gently. Inside was a smaller, quieter room. On the walls hung paintings of a woman, soft brushstrokes, bright colors, flowers. And in the center, on a pedestal, stood an unfinished portrait, a woman with warm brown eyes, smiling faintly. Philip's throat tightened. "That's her. That's my mom." Edward nodded, his voice trembling. "She painted this herself. She was an artist before everything fell apart." Edward sat down, motioning for Philip to do the same. "I met Diane 20 years ago," he began. "I was young, foolish, and already engaged to a woman chosen by my family. My father controlled everything, the company, the media, even my life." He paused, taking a shaky breath. "I met your mother at a charity exhibit. She wasn't like anyone I'd ever known. She laughed without fear, spoke her mind, and saw beauty where others saw flaws. She taught me to see the world beyond walls and color." Philip's eyes softened slightly. "So what happened?" Edward's voice cracked. "My father found out. He said loving her would ruin us, that investors would pull out, the board would rebel, and the press would destroy the Abel name." "So you left her," Philip said flatly. Edward's face twisted in pain. "No. I tried to fight. I even proposed to her in secret. But my father threatened to destroy her, to take you away before you were even born. Diane fled Chicago to protect you both." He rubbed his forehead. "I searched for her for years. But when I finally found her, it was too late. She'd passed away. And you were gone." Philip's chest tightened. "She never told me any of that. She said my father, Didn't want me. Edward's eyes filled with tears. I wanted you more than anything. But I was weak. I let fear and power decide my life. And I've regretted it every day since. Silence. Heavy and aching. For the first time, Philip saw the truth behind the man's wealth. The loneliness, the guilt, the years of empty success. The next morning, Philip woke up to chaos. The mansion was buzzing with calls and voices. Edward's assistant rushed into the dining room holding a tablet. Sir, it's everywhere. Someone leaked the story. On the screen were headlines splashed across every major outlet. Edward Abel's secret son revealed, and he's black. The billionaire's hidden family, love, lies, and legacy. Philip's stomach twisted. He hadn't even told anyone yet, and already the world knew. Who leaked this? Edward demanded. The assistant hesitated. We suspect someone inside the family. Philip looked up and said, The family? A slow, deliberate voice answered from the doorway. I told them, Edward. The public deserved the truth. A woman entered, elegant, cold, her eyes sharp as glass. Claudia Abel. Edward's younger sister. Philip could tell instantly she didn't come to welcome him. Claudia, Edward began warningly. She ignored him and turned to Philip. So you're the boy. The son of that woman who nearly cost Edward everything. Philip's hands clenched. That woman was my mother. Yes, and she was clever, Claudia replied smoothly. But this, she gestured at him, this will destroy us. Edward slammed his hand on the table. Enough. He's my son, Claudia. Our blood. She smirked. Then you'd better prepare for the consequences. Investors are already calling. The board wants answers. She turned to Philip again, her tone laced with venom. You don't belong here. And no matter what you think, money won't buy you a name. Then she left, heels clicking against marble, sharp, final, like a verdict. That evening, Philip stood on the mansion balcony, staring at the city lights below. The world that had ignored him was now screaming his name, not out of love, but curiosity and judgment. His phone buzzed with messages. Strangers calling him names. Some called him lucky, others worse. He wanted to disappear. But then Edward appeared beside him, holding 2 cups of hot chocolate. I know it's hard, he said softly. But you don't have to face it alone. Philip hesitated. Why didn't you fight harder for her? For me. Edward looked down, ashamed. Because I thought power mattered more than love. I was wrong. I won't make that mistake again. Philip sipped the chocolate slowly. The warmth spread through him, though not enough to melt the frost in his chest. I don't know if I can ever forgive you, he whispered. Edward nodded. Then I'll wait until you can. However long it takes. 2 days later, the chaos reached its peak. Cameras surrounded the Abel headquarters. Reporters shouted questions, their microphones jabbing forward like weapons. Edward had called for a press conference, not to defend himself, but to defend his son. Philip didn't want to go, but Edward insisted. You have a right to be heard. You've been silent too long. When they stepped onto the stage, the flashes were blinding. Reporters yelled over each other. Mr. Abel, did you really hide your son for 16 years? Philip, how does it feel to know your father abandoned you? Is this a publicity stunt? Edward tried to answer, but the crowd drowned him out. Then one reporter shouted, Philip, do you think you deserve to be an Abel? Philip froze. The world seemed to stop spinning. He could see their faces, the disbelief, the quiet prejudice, the judgment. He felt his mother's voice inside him again. Hold your head high, my little prince. He stepped forward, his voice steady. I don't care about the name, he said, or the money. I care about the truth. My mother raised me to believe that a person's worth isn't in their skin or their last name, it's in their heart. The room fell silent. Then Philip added, his eyes burning, if being an able means hiding behind lies and shame, then maybe it's not me who doesn't belong, maybe it's this world that needs to change. The cameras exploded in flashes. Edward looked at him, pride and tears mixing in his eyes. When the conference ended, Edward reached for Philip, pulling him into a tight embrace. I'm proud of you, son, he whispered. You spoke like your mother. Philip blinked back tears. For the first time, the word son didn't sting as much. But as they left the stage, a figure watched from the crowd, Claudia. Her lips curved into a thin, icy smile. She turned to her assistant and murmured, he won their sympathy today. But I'll make sure it doesn't last. No boy from the slums will inherit the able empire. Not while I'm still breathing. That night, Philip sat in the guest room, scrolling through endless news articles. Some headlines praised him. Others tore him apart. He sighed, closing the screen. The mansion felt both safe and suffocating. As he lay in bed, he whispered to himself, maybe belonging isn't about where you live, but who stands beside you when the world turns its back. Outside, a storm gathered over the city, lightning flashing in the distance. Unseen, Claudia stood by her window in the West Wing, her eyes cold and calculating. She made a call. It's time, she said quietly. Make sure the boy regrets ever stepping into this house. The storm that rolled over Chicago that night was no ordinary one. Thunder cracked like the heavens themselves were at war, and rain hammered against the windows of the Able mansion as if trying to break its pride. Inside, Philip sat awake at his desk, watching the lightning flash across the city skyline. He wasn't afraid of storms, he'd lived through worse. But this one felt different, like it was warning him. He didn't know that, across the hall, Claudia Able was already setting her plans into motion. By morning, the storm had passed, but tension lingered like smoke. Philip woke to find Edward gone for an early meeting. The mansion felt unusually quiet. When he walked downstairs, two men in suits were whispering near the foyer. They stopped talking when they saw him. One muttered, "That's him," before walking away. Philip frowned. Something felt off. At breakfast, Claudia appeared, calm, polished, sipping tea as if nothing had happened. "Good morning, nephew," she said sweetly. "I saw your little speech on television. Quite impressive. The press loves you, for now." Philip looked up warily. "What do you mean, for now?" "Oh," she said casually, stirring her tea, "the media can build you up one day and tear you down the next. Especially if they think you've been hiding something." Before he could respond, she slid a tablet across the table. On the screen was a photo, his photo, edited to show him holding a gun beside a group of older boys. The headline read, "Edward Abel's son has a criminal past, shocking photos surface." Philip's blood ran cold. "That's fake," he shouted. "I've never seen those people in my life." Claudia smiled faintly. "Perhaps. But the internet doesn't care about truth, dear boy. Perception is everything." He realized what she was doing, discrediting him before he could even belong. "You'll never accept me, will you?" he said quietly. She leaned forward, eyes sharp. "You're not one of us, Philip. You never will be." Within hours, the story spread like wildfire. Social media exploded with accusations, rumors, and hateful comments. #PhilipAble trended for all the wrong reasons. Edward rushed home, furious. "Claudia, what have you done?" She feigned innocence. "Don't look at me. The media works fast these days." Philip stormed into the room, eyes red with anger. "You said I'd ruin the family's image. Now you're trying to make it come true." Edward stood between them. "Enough. Claudia, if I find out you're behind this..." "You'll what?" she snapped. "Throw me out of my own family? You'd destroy everything father built, for him?" She pointed at Philip like he was a disease. "For a boy who doesn't even share our blood?" That word, blood, hit harder than any insult. Philip looked at Edward. "Is that what they all think? That I don't belong because I'm not white enough to be an Abel?" Edward's voice broke. "No, son. You belong because you're mine. And because you've already shown more strength and honor than anyone in this house." But Philip couldn't bear the tension. He packed his things that night and left, quietly, with nothing but his mother's photograph in his hand. Days turned into weeks. Philip disappeared from the spotlight, moving into a small apartment on the city's south side. It wasn't much, but it was his, a place without whispers or cameras. He spent his days volunteering at a community center, teaching kids how to use computers, build code, and dream beyond their limits. They called him Mr. Phil. They didn't know or care about his last name. One afternoon, as he helped a young boy fix an old tablet, a local news crew came by to film a story on the center's work. The reporter asked him, "Aren't you Edward Abel's son?" Philip hesitated, then smiled. "I'm just someone trying to give back. That's all." The segment aired that evening, not as gossip, but as inspiration. And the world took notice. Messages poured in from schools, charities, and families thanking him for helping their children. The narrative began to shift from billionaire's scandalous son to young man changing lives. Meanwhile, Edward faced backlash of his own. The company's board threatened to remove him over the family controversy. But Edward didn't care about losing wealth anymore. He cared about regaining his son. One night, he found himself watching the news when Philip's story appeared on screen. He saw his son surrounded by smiling children, laughter echoing through the small center. Edward's eyes filled with tears. "That's him," he whispered. "That's who he was always meant to be." A week later, the truth finally came out. A whistleblower from the PR department leaked emails showing that Claudia had paid tabloids and hackers to doctor the photos and leak false stories about Philip. The board confronted Edward with the evidence. He didn't hesitate. "She's done," he said coldly. "I built this company to create technology for progress, not to destroy my own family." By the next morning, Claudia Abel was publicly exposed and stripped of her position. Her reputation shattered, her power gone. Edward held a press conference, this time alone. He faced the cameras with quiet conviction. "I made mistakes," he began. "I let fear dictate my choices. But my son, Philip, taught me something I'd forgotten, that integrity and courage are worth more than any fortune. He is not my shame. He is my redemption." The world listened. And this time, they believed him. Philip didn't see the press conference live. He was too busy helping the kids prepare for a coding fair. But when he returned home that night, he found a letter slipped under his door. It was written in his father's handwriting. "There's an event tomorrow at the Civic Hall. I'm not asking you to come for me, come for the children. They're naming the new program after your mother. The Diane Foundation for Hope." Philip stared at the letter for a long moment. Then he smiled. The hall was filled with people, reporters, business leaders, and community workers. Edward stood on stage, looking older but lighter, freer. When he saw Philip enter, his face softened into a smile of pure relief. He gestured for him to join him on stage. "Everyone," Edward said into the microphone, "this is my son, Philip Abel, the man who inspired this project." Applause rippled through the crowd. Cameras flashed. But Philip didn't flinch this time. He stepped up, took the microphone, and spoke from his heart. "When I was younger," he began, "the world told me I didn't belong. They said I wasn't good enough, rich enough, or the right color to stand where I am today." He paused, scanning the audience. But I learned something: you can't let other people define your worth. Because gold can still shine, even when buried in dust. The crowd erupted in applause. Even Edward had tears in his eyes. Philip smiled faintly and added, "This foundation isn't about me. It's about my mother, a woman who believed in kindness when the world gave her cruelty. And it's about every child who's ever been told they can't, proving they can." After the ceremony, Philip and Edward stood outside beneath the soft glow of the city lights. For once, there was peace, real, quiet peace. Edward turned to him. "I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I hope someday I can earn it." Philip looked at him for a long moment, then said, "You already started earning it, Dad." It was the first time he'd called him that. The word hung in the air, fragile and beautiful. Edward exhaled shakily and smiled. "Your mother would be proud of you." Philip looked up at the night sky. "I think she already is." A week later, Philip visited a quiet spot overlooking Lake Michigan, his mother's resting place. He placed a small bouquet of lilies beside her stone, along with one of her old paintbrushes. "Mom," he said softly, "you told me I'd find where I belong. You were right. It just took a few storms to get here." The wind brushed through the trees as if answering him. Edward stood a few steps behind, hands in his pockets. Philip turned to him, smiling faintly. "Let's go home." Together, they walked toward the car, the city lights reflecting in the calm water behind them. The world would always remember him as the boy who went from trash to treasure, but Philip Abel knew the truth. He hadn't risen because of money, or a name, or fame. He'd risen because he found the courage to stand tall in a world that once tried to break him. And for the first time in his life, he didn't feel like the boy nobody wanted. He felt like the man his mother had always known he would become. Thanks for watching. If you found the story interesting, please like, share, and subscribe to Boundless Echoes for more interesting videos. We deeply appreciate your support, and we don't take it for granted. Comment where you are watching from so we can give you a shout out. See you in our next video.